welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 207. Thank you for joining us. Today, Bonnie and I are joined by Kolbe homeschooling mom and academic advisor, Elyse Williams. Long before joining our academic advising team, Elyse was homeschooling with Kolbe and helping others do the same. We're fortunate to be able to soak up some of this wisdom today and share it with you. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and chief homeschooling officer for Kolbe Academy.
Happy Eclipse Day, Stephen. How's it going?
It's going well. Just as you started talking, I hear my big dog starting to bark. We've got a house full of people visiting for the eclipse, and we're right in the main path here. So some Kolbe people, some friends, family, and with 3 dogs that aren't used to having anybody else around. It's a kind of an exciting time.
That's very fun. It's fun to mark the day and time that I didn't realize the magnitude of what the eclipse day would mean, really. Like, it's all about the eclipse today. And I wasn't really in that headspace when we were playing this. I'm going to take you back in time a little bit, listeners. So when I started out as a Kolbe mom, Kolbe has hosted parent webinars at the beginning of the school years where they would have some Kolbe parents come and kind of share their experience and take questions from families and so forth. And one of the ladies who would repeatedly be on these webinars is the lady we get to visit with today. She's a Kolbe mom and now a Kolbe advisor, Mrs. Elyse Williams. Hi, Elyse. Welcome to the Kolbecast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Bonnie and Stephen. I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm very excited to visit with you. I've been biding my time to get you here on the podcast. And so listeners may also recognize Elyse either from their interactions with her as their advisor or from Kolbe virtual open houses that we've had. Without further ado, will you tell us about yourself and your background and all these Kolbe connections I've been hinting at?
All right, awesome. I sure will. Thanks, Bonnie. All right, like she said, my name is Elyse Williams. I live in North Texas, so hopefully today I'll be able to see some of the eclipse as well. I am a Roman Catholic. I feel like a reverted one, though. A cradle Catholic, but I really started reading the children's Bible to my children, when they were little in the early 2000s, and it really made sense. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can finally put everything in order. Like Abraham came before Isaac, and Isaac came before Jacob, and Jacob became before Joseph and Moses. And it started to make sense. So God was nudging me, all along throughout that process. I've been married almost 31 years to my husband, John, and we have 4 children. 3 of whom have graduated from Kolbe and are in their careers or higher education. My last child will be a senior in the fall. So I registered him for the last time a couple of weeks ago, and this sort of bittersweet, but it's a good thing. It's all good. I was a registered nurse before they were born. So I have 2 degrees. I have a degree in health education and I have a degree in nursing as well. So they sort of go hand in hand. I like to read about theology and history and medicine. And I have recently, in the last couple of years, learned sourdough and baking. And I like doing all that. Now that with Kolbe, I have to figure out the timings of all of that. It makes it a little bit different with work, but I can still do bread. I started researching curriculums probably 20 years ago. I found a diocesan newspaper near where I live, and Kolbe was in there. And I remember that it was a picture of a young lady looking at a book or something, and it said subsidiarity. This is your choice. Some other things, but I just remember that word, and I thought to myself, well, I don't even know what that word means, so I had to go look it up. And along with my reversion back to Catholicism and my journey and the fact that I wanted a specific type of education for my children, Kolbe just seemed like the way to go. And so I did some more research, and we were coming from a private Catholic school environment. And I just fell in love with the literature program. I thought to myself, oh my goodness, if my kids can read this stuff, because, you look at the elementary school curriculum in middle school, and then you get to high school and you're thinking, how are they going to do all of that? And it's really It begins at the beginning. It begins in elementary school. It begins little, and it's little by little, and it's inch by inch, and it's so it's insidious almost how it occurs. And by the time they get to their senior year, they are doing that what you wanted them in the beginning. And so that was one reason why we chose Kolbe so many years ago. And we used the Kolbe curriculum in the traditional homeschool format because at that time there wasn't an online program. And so I can remember getting the big box that Nancy would send, and with all the books and all the paper, course plans, thinking, what have I got myself into? I can remember in the beginning, I thought I had to rewrite all that stuff out. I didn't realize that you got a new one of those every year that you enrolled.
Yeah.
You get new course plans every year. I thought, oh my goodness, well, I'm going to need this course plan for my next kid who's 2 years, younger. So I'm going to keep this course plan. It's going to be all nice and neat. I'm going to rewrite all this stuff. Oh my goodness, that was such a waste of time. But I learned. I mean, you learn. So at any rate, so we used it in the traditional homeschool format, and then in 2013, the school was. I think they sent an email saying this is something we're thinking about. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's so great. How wonderful and providential. I mean, God is taking care of me. I had no idea how I was going to do geometry, how I was going to do trig or calculus or Greek literature. I mean, I saw Greek literature and Greek history. I had a public school education. I didn't have any of this classical kind of thing. Never read any of this stuff. And I thought to myself, how am I going to teach these things to my kids? Because I don't even have this stuff. And lo and behold, the online program started. And so that first year, my son took 3, and he did 3 with me. And then the next year I asked him, I said, do you want to do all online? And luckily all the things that we needed were online by that time. And he said, yes, I don't want you to teach me anymore. And so, I still, kept an eye on, grammar and content and papers and looking at things and doing, outside fine arts and PE and those kinds of things. But the main bulk of his education was the online education. So each kid successively started with an online class in the 7th grade, because at the time there was no elementary and there was no middle school. And truthfully, if I had, I don't know, that would be an interesting question to ask others. How do they decide which route they wanted to go? Did they want to do traditional? Do they want to do online? For us, I enjoyed that one-on-one contact, that time with my child in the beginning years, so that I could learn, how does this child learn? How does this child is auditory, kinesthetic, visual, and so I understood his or her strengths and weaknesses better by the time they got to the online program. So for that's how it worked for us. So basically, once they got to high school, they did all online. They took a self-paced class here or there. 2 of my kids did. So we've used various degrees of everything. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's been an intense ride. It's hard to believe that it's coming to a close in another year, which is amazing to me. So at any rate, which is sort of how it, sort of morphed into my advisor role here at Kolbe. I knew that, our homeschooling life as a family, the homeschooling part of it was dwindling, is coming to an end. I only have one left at home, and he doesn't need me, day in and day out for schooling. Now we talk about scheduling, we talk about timing, we talk about what's the most important thing. We do that every day. We usually make a time to check in with each other about, what he maybe needs to do. He might bounce something off of me, should I wait to do this, or should I go ahead and do, So I still have an idea of what's going on with him, but he doesn't need me day in and day out like they did when they were little. And so I thought, well, I don't have $1 zillion, and I don't have a money tree, which I'd love to have. We all would. But what I do have is my time. And so my time is valuable. And my favorite thing is to talk to parents, especially those who are just starting their journey. And so I thought, well, how can I best, what does God want me to do? What does he want me to do with this knowledge, this experience that he's giving me over the last 15 years? And it kept coming back to helping other families, helping, Kolbe families. And so the job opportunity came up, and so I interviewed, and it's just been a wonderful process. And my favorite thing is when I get a phone call and I can talk to someone and tell them it's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. God's given you this time to do this. And so it re-energizes me as well. And so it's been a seamless sort of transition. I mean, I haven't worked, for a paycheck in the last 25 years until, starting a couple of months ago. But it does seem, it seems sort of seamless. I don't feel like I'm actually working when I do go to work, because I am here at home. If my son does need me, I'm right there. In fact, we just went on a college visit the other day, and so I was able to work a little bit, more on certain days so that I could have off with him. So it's been a seamless transition.
Yeah. You're certainly well suited to it. You've done it all. Sounds like all the various offerings that Kolbe has. You've been around for a long time. You've been through it yourself. Certainly the ideal person for helping other families.
Well, you're sweet. It's been a privilege of a lifetime.
Hmm.
God gives you those beautiful souls to care for, and they're each unique in their own way.
Yeah.
And what better way to influence the culture by learning yourself and learning with them and help molding them with the things that you learn. Teacher manuals are your friend. And so I would say, while I was trying to teach them, of course, I'd be sometimes looking at the teacher manual because I needed to know what the correct answer was, to teach them. I didn't want to teach them wrong. But usually what would happen is I start reading that, and then I keep reading, like the Faith and Life series of the St. Ignatius Press, of all the, Jesus Our Life series in the elementary school. They're all beautifully organized the same way. Each year gets successively more in depth and, more into the faith. And I would sit and read that for minutes at a time. Pick and choose when I was able to read them, but that's how I learned my faith. So I'm learning right along with them. I learned how to diagram sentences with them because I never learned it in school. It's been a beautiful thing, and it's been a tremendous gift. I don't want to make it sound like it's been easy, because it is not easy, but anything that is worth doing is usually difficult. Why? Because we're prideful creatures, we're prideful human beings, and it's hard to learn. A lot of times we think we know how to do it, and we don't.
My wife deals with most of the heavy lifting with homeschooling, but I'm constantly impressed by how she's always working to try to, like you were saying, to try to figure out that, like, why is this not clicking? What needs to be changed? And, this child is so different than this child, and all of that. And I just get to largely deal with the fruits of all of her labor and think, this is so great. My kids come and talk to me, and we have great conversations, and I get inspired to learn by their interests and like what, or the reverse of that. But yeah, that main role, I'm always impressed that you homeschooling moms who kind of take on the daily burden. That's a great gift to the kids and to husbands and I guess to themselves. I guess to yourself.
You're sweet to say that. It's everyone working in tandem. It's everyone working for a common goal. And so I think that's important, especially as you start your homeschooling process. What do you want out of this? What is the family's goal for this? We didn't ask those questions of ourselves right in the beginning. We just knew we wanted to do it because we wanted to take them out of the environment they were in. But we didn't really think of, on the opposite side, what are we wanting for this, for them? What are we wanting for our entire family? And we know when you're home with each other all the time, you learn the idiosyncrasies of each individual in that family. You learn their strengths and weaknesses. You learn how to work as a unit, as a whole. And so everyone brings to the table a different role. And I think God uses us that way, especially to further his kingdom, but to grow as a family, because there will be a time when everyone does leave and the couple is there again by themselves. And that's where my husband and I are going to be very soon. But yet our children enjoy coming home. We sit around and we converse and we talk. And if we hadn't had homeschooled, we wouldn't have the relationships that we have. And that in itself is a gift. So, if you're struggling with third grade math or sixth grade math or 10th grade math, there's a bigger picture to be seen. And yes, the little stuff, the little hardships, they're there, but sometimes you have to step outside and you have to look at the big picture. Why are we doing this? What do we want for our children, our family? Faith was really important to us. And that's the one thing about Kolbe, that Catholicism is infused everywhere in science and math, especially in the humanities. And so they learn to look at the world through a Catholic lens. And so when the world pulls on them, and it will, they're able better to withstand those winds. And that, I think, is one of the most important things with homeschooling, but especially with Kolbe. I don't have any other experience with any other curriculum. We've only used Kolbe. You do have the time to sit with your children. I do have the time to think about, well, why isn't this child getting this? And we learned that one of our children had dyslexia. And so we went about necessary, steps to help him. And this was before Kolbe had those resources. So now Kolbe has those resources in the house, and it just makes it so much more cohesive, because you've got all these teachers, you have all these resource people knowing what your family needs and knowing how to put them in touch with the right person that can give them the help that they need. Kolbe's like a one-stop shop.
Yeah, we've only been with Kolbe now for 3 years, so you've been with Kolbe longer than we have. But I'm really amazed. I mean, the depth of the curriculum and everything is fantastic. But again, there's so many things here. I love my kids' experience with Kolbe so far, and they seem like they're so prepared. I mean, already I was thinking as you were talking, like, yeah, right now there's lots of nights where I'm thinking I need to get a good night's sleep. I'm going to go to bed early, and then I look at the clock and it's like, oh, I spent 2 hours talking with my son about all these interesting things, and I'm not going to get as much sleep, or my daughter, and it's like, okay, this is not the public school experience that I had growing up.
Right.
But I just see they're so prepared. Like I know they can talk with adults perfectly well, and they're disciplined now. I know when they go off to college, they've basically had a college experience kind of with Kolbe. They've been self-moving, so they're ready. They're ready to do it.
The three older children that I have had no problems transitioning from academics with Kolbe to academics with college. It's never too early to start thinking about high school when you've got a fifth and sixth grader. It's not, you don't want to get bogged down in the anxiety of all the different minutiae of all the different classes you can take and all that kind of thing. You don't want to be anxious. You just want to be aware. So when you have a fifth or sixth grader, seventh grader, you want to do a really good reconnaissance job of looking at the website of Kolbe. Just start looking at the different kinds of maths and the different kinds of science, and research the different tracks that Kolbe has on. Kolbe has one diploma, but they have the minimum required track and the recommended track, if you're going into a 4-year kind of college. And so I always say that, information is key. Information is your friend. And so being anxious about high school isn't going to help anyone, but having in the back of your mind, these are the kinds of things I'm thinking about. These are the kinds of things I want, for my student. Always doing things a little bit early rather than later is always a great idea. But in high school, I like to say there's a fine line with everything. There's a fine line of letting them swim, and then there's a fine line with you catching them, because they're going to forget things. They don't have the brain that we do. Yes, I know they might be 6 feet tall and look like a grown man and shave, but that doesn't mean their brain is like a 30-year-old man that, thinks, ahead. And you got to take what their bodies look like with a grain of salt. And every year is different in high school, and every child is different, and what worked for one might not work for another. But what you're doing in high school is you're teaching them how to self-advocate. by planning, by time management, by learning how to email their teachers in a polite way, by having them ask themselves, what's the most important thing that I need to get done every day? Having that running dialogue with themselves, can pay dividends in the long run, because none of this happens overnight. A child just doesn't wake up as a freshman in high school and say, okay, I know I've got to read 6 chapters of the Iliad today, and I'm going to do all of them because they're all due tomorrow. No, that's probably not the best.
Maybe once.
Maybe what they do that once and they realize I can never do that again. And of course, as we all know, experience is the best teacher, but preparation, time, those are all good things to remember as high schoolers. College test prep, assessment tests for strengths. It doesn't have anything to do with knowledge, education. It's how God made you innately. And those kinds of things are things you want to start thinking about at the beginning of high school, because you're going to have to guide your child to a type of major, a type of college, all of those kinds of things.
I'm wondering if you could take us back a bit to when everybody was offline and younger, and you are managing all that. What are your memories of that? What did that, it's probably an amalgamation now of multiple years of that, but do you have a kind of
Okay, well, let's see. The last year that everybody was at home with no online schooling was 11 years ago.
Okay.
That was the spring of 2013. We started our days early, and in those days, usually I would wake them up and have breakfast ready by the time that they started school. The older ones were in, 6th and 8th grade at that time, and they could really do things more on their own. I was more with the younger ones at that time. They were probably in 1st and 3rd at that time. And so I really spent a lot of my time with them, more than I did with the older ones. However, as they got into high school, we usually would awake around 6:30. I would be doing breakfast while we were doing schoolwork already, because their classes didn't start till 7:30 or 8. So they might have an hour and a half before school starts. My 2 older ones did not like doing anything after like 5 or 5:30 in the evening. They were done. They're like, this is ridiculous. This is my time. I don't want to go fishing, or I want to do something else. My student now, he rather would take longer breaks during the day. I mean, not that he takes a ton of breaks, but he doesn't mind doing a little bit of work in the evening. So we spent the greater part of a day, usually 7 to 5. Now the younger ones never went that long. They ended shorter, but truthfully, it gave the older ones an opportunity to say, okay, I have mom for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And in fact, they would stack all their books up at the end of my desk, and they say, okay, mom, all this stuff's ready for grading. So I have 4 stacks of kids with grading for me to do every day so that I could get it back to them. So there with mom time was me, saying, okay, this was great. This isn't great. You need to work on this. And so they would learn that was the time that they could ask me questions, that they had me to themselves. And it was one-on-one. And that gave the younger ones time to either go outside and play, or maybe they'd watch a video, or maybe they'd be coloring, but they couldn't interrupt us because it was mom and whoever's time. And of course, not every day worked wonderfully, but the time would stretch out as they got older to realize that they had to be patient and let the older ones have some time with mom, instead of younger. But most of the time, mayhem would ensue close to lunchtime. And if someone takes a break, everybody takes a break, no matter what age kid you have. Even 17-year-olds, they can act goofy too.
Right.
So we weren't too incredibly busy outside of school. With 4 kids, my husband worked 40, 45 hours a week away. Sometimes he would be out of town. And so it was me, before the older ones could drive, it was me taking to, practices and whatnot. And so our thing is that one kid could have one activity a semester. That may seem a little bit harsh because every kid should be involved in something. However, for our family, it was just, they loved being outside and playing and not having anything to do, anything that they had to go do. So if someone said, hey, I want to play soccer, then that kid got to go play soccer, and we would support that child. And when soccer was over the next semester, if someone said, hey, I want to do piano lessons, then that's, we took them to piano lessons and we go to their concerts and, we supported that child. So it was never okay, each kid gets something and we have to go 4 different places at 4 different times. And I personally couldn't do that. And truthfully, it worked out because it was the older ones sort of wanting to do things and the younger ones sort of wanted to be at home. And then as the older ones got older and left, or they could stay home with the child, with other children while I took somebody else because they were old enough to stay home and they could drive. It worked out that way. One standout memory I have of Kolbe is 2 things really. One year, one of my sons wanted to get all his school done in one day for the week. So he did. So he's like, okay, I'm going to look at every single course. I'm going to look at everything. I'm going to do everything in one day. So it took him about 4 hours and he did everything. And I know this was 3rd grade. But the next 4 days of the week, he was busy doing whatever he wanted to do. If he was outside digging in the dirt or whatever. And so all the other kids were like, wow, I want to do that too, So that's one standout memory. Everybody remembers that. The second one is in 2016, my 2 olders were at World Youth Day in Poland. And they were walking down a sidewalk with a whole bunch of other kids. They were going to St. Faustina's convent. And somebody came up to my second son, came up and tapped him on the shoulder and said, you're in my class at Kolbe. And he looked at her name tag and she looked at his and he said, oh my goodness, you're in my such and such. I don't remember what class it was, but here they are a continent away and they know each other. And it's just so beautiful memory.
That's neat. So then as they got older and they were more online, what are your memories of what your role was? How did those days look when they were more into high school and it was less of you, like the one-on-one?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, one of the most wonderful things that I used to say to them, and I still do because one of them is still in school. I'm like, I am not your teacher. If you have a question, you have to ask your teacher. And they're like, oh, and they just, they hem and haw and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm like, this isn't a brick and mortar school. They can't see your face they can see their face, when they want to, and they put up the screen and everything, but they can't see your face all the time. So they don't know if you're looking at them, with a furrowed brow or you're like, oh yeah, I got this. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a wonderful, the online education is a wonderful way, like I said earlier, for them to learn how to advocate for themselves. So, I tell them, if you don't understand, get on your email and Mrs. So-and-so, Miss Dr. So-and-so, I really need some help. I'm struggling with this concept. I said, those teachers love to get those emails because it helps them understand, are these kids really learning something? Are they paying attention? Do they really get what I'm trying to say? Do they get the breadth of all this really cool, awesome stuff? And there's no way for them to really know that unless the students email them. So that's my first and foremost thing about having them learn how to add. And it's sort of a sneaky way to get them to be responsible. It's that little by little, inch by inch thing. So I was more hands off because I wasn't teaching them. Once that knowledge is in your brain, no one can take it away from you. It's there. Now, you might forget things here and there, but when you read something and they're talking about Herodotus or they're talking about Eusebius or whatnot, you recall back when you had to learn that. You may not remember all the intricacies of it, but you remember the struggle and you remember that you triumphed over it. And I remember, I think in the AP class, in the AP Lit class with Mrs. Crawford, they read Man's Search for Meaning. I want to say they do. And 2 of my students took AP Lit, so they did read it. My third one, my oldest, did not take AP Lit, but he read Man's Search for Meaning in college. And we were all sitting around talking about it one day. The oldest one said, he's like, Mom, they took everything from him. He was in a concentration camp. He's naked. He has nothing. He's literally nothing to call his own. And he has nothing. He's humiliated. He said, and yet, he had what was in his brain. And so that's something that I always remember about all the struggle of high school, because it is a struggle. And you and I and Stephen, we all know as adults that all of this is really preparing them for the journey that lies ahead. And so part of me, part of me wonders, okay, is this all really good? Is, making them do, such an intense curriculum now, is it the best thing for them? And because I have the experience that I do with the years that I have, I believe it is. I believe it's worth it. Because right now their brains are sponges. They are just ready to learn, and they rise to the level of expectation. The understanding is that was what was required of them, and they did it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I'm always amazed. Well, I'm amazed because although we were homeschooling when my first children were doing, I was looking over those Kolbe courses and thinking, oh my, this is what I read my first year in college,
Right.
and they're tackling it kind of at the same pace here. How are they going to do that? And it was a struggle, especially at the beginning. But as I watched my son go through that and learn, okay, I have to plan ahead. I have to break up this reading. I have to do these things in order to get to
Right.
this end point. I'm just like, he can do it. He can actually, if this can be done. And
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, and then the quality of, I mean, just yesterday we had people over with waiting for the eclipse to happen today, and we're talking about the relationship of husband and wife, and there have been some conflicts or some things that somebody was, but we were going back to the Odyssey. Here's what the ancient Greeks even viewed, and seeing that virtue and how they even viewed this natural relationship before the incarnation, and
Right.
so these really wonderful texts that give you this like expansive knowledge, I mean, of things, it's just beautiful material for them to be working on, and they can do it and they benefit from it. So.
Right. They're not going to read the Federalist Papers when they're in 7th grade, but they're going to read Cricket in Times Square in the 4th grade, and they're going to fall in love with a story. They're going to fall in love with that in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. All 4 of my kids have said how wonderful the Iliad is. They so enjoy, that's one of their favorite books. I mean, and it's a story, and they could not have gotten there if they wouldn't have had the Catholic National Reader in elementary school, or if they wouldn't have had The Hobbit in 4th or 5th grade, if they wouldn't have had those things, if they wouldn't have had Herodotus in the 9th grade, they wouldn't be getting to the Federalist Papers in the 12th grade. And so it's the totality of the classical education that builds year by year. It's the beauty of God in the mind of a student, of a person. And when you're stuck in the middle of it and your oldest is in 6th grade and you're thinking, how in the world am I going to get to 12th grade? It's so hard to see that. Have faith and trust and know that those little decisions that you make day in and day out are going to get you to the goal that you want. And, if you would have told me that 11 years ago when we're starting, high school on the online program, I don't know if I would have believed you.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a lot of homeschooling families in the beginning that I knew when I started. Sometimes you feel really alone and you're wondering, is this the right thing? Am I doing this? And now that Kolbe is growing and the community is growing, it's there. And there are so many like-minded parents. I see them when we're at the open house, which is wonderful. There's an army of us that want a certain type of education for our children, and we're out there. It's a little more difficult to see because we're all on these box things that we're looking at, these computers, but there's real people, flesh and blood people that are doing the exact same thing you're doing. They're in the trenches right now, working hard, cleaning floors, cleaning kitchen tables, because you got to eat lunch again in 4 hours. And I mean, we're all working to the goal of forming our children, with the correct knowledge through the lens of Catholicism.
It's always very exciting. I've been able to go to 2 graduations now. It's just interesting because even though Kolbe families often don't have a ton of Kolbe families around them, there's just such a common, well, like you were just saying, a common end and a common experience that everybody has So you really are part of this community, even though you don't get to see a whole lot of people but when you do get to, it's just like you can jump right into it because you've read the kids have read the same books. And parents are making the same journey together, but just not always
Right.
aware of everything
I
else.
agree. And if you can somehow get to graduation at the end, I would totally recommend doing that. The first graduation we had, it was online. The second one, my son wasn't completely interested in going. I wish I would have been more forceful with him about that. My third child really, really wanted to go. And so we did. And it was wonderful seeing all these people we've seen for, years and years. Meeting parents and my son's shaking hands with people that they've seen online, through a computer screen. But yes, it is a community. It is real. You don't get to see them all the time, of course, but they're out there, and we're all working towards one goal, and that is providing our children and the next generation with the tools that they need to continue to further the kingdom of God on earth. Is really what it's all about.
Equipping them for things they have no idea they are coming in one
That
in
they
one way or
have no
another.
idea.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That they have no idea that they're coming. That's true.
Well, going back to that whole, we have to eat again in a few hours. I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the things that go along with the day-to-day of homeschooling. So what are your thoughts on balancing homeschooling with your other obligations and interests?
I love to read. And so that to me is a priority. So if my kids are busy doing stuff, by themselves, then I might take 10 or 15 minutes and read a little bit, or I might meditate a bit, or I might do a little bit of my rosary or whatnot. Or I might go clean a bathroom, anything that I can benefit, use that time while they're doing something else. It's definitely more difficult the more children you have and the more little people that you have. Getting them involved in whatever it is you're doing was really important for me. Like if the 6-year-old needed to do something and the 3-year-old was busy making a mess, then that 3-year-old would come with me and start doing laundry with me, or setting the table, or drawing something, or feeding the cat. Or a lot of times when one was in kindergarten or first grade and one was a toddler, that toddler did whatever the kindergartner did. I would make copies ahead of time so that he would be coloring or whatnot when the kindergartner was doing her work. And if I was prepared, the day would go better. Like I said, the balancing of extracurricular activities, luckily our church, our CCD, our youth group programs, those were always on the weekend, which was nice because I didn't have to finagle doing all that stuff during the week. So truthfully, that was a very big godsend for me. I don't know how I would have been able to do it. It would have been more difficult. And that's where you as a family have to decide, what's the most important thing? What things can we let fall? A lot of people are keeping up with the Joneses, and if they're in 2 or 3 different things, then I've got to be in 2 or 3 different things too. And if you've come to this decision about homeschooling, you're not really thinking about what other people are saying, because they're going to look at you like you're crazy. I mean, after you see how your children thrive in the environment, whatever environment that looks like for your family, then you're much more confident to say, we don't have to do everything that everybody else is doing. So, I guess our outside obligations were, making sure we went to mass, making sure the kids were going to church school, making sure that if they wanted to go to youth group, they could. And then each successive child got to do their one activity. And sometimes they all decided they didn't want to do anything. As they get into high school, it's definitely more difficult. So therein lies another decision. Some people can do it all. They can make great grades, and they can be in 5 different clubs, and they can do all of these kinds of things. And that's wonderful. That's great. Our family, I mean, the kids did wonderfully in school, but that was what we did. Academics was really important for us, and being able to, do well so that they could pay their way in college. But all 3 of them got wonderful scholarships, which helped us out immensely in college. We would not have been able to afford to send them because we had one. Now we have 2, but we had one, income that whole entire time. So part of their work, I mean, they knew that their job was school. That was their job. That was what God was asking them to do the time that they were in it. And so their job was to do as well as they could so that they could, in turn, get scholarships to go to various schools.
What about weathering hard stuff?
Right. Okay. I can't imagine sending my kids to a school where they were gone from me 8 hours a day, because in high school, and I know y'all have had high schools and now college kids, y'all know hard conversations come in high school. And sometimes we had to have those conversations at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And we would talk for an hour or we talk for 2 hours. And I know that sounds crazy, but teenagers need that freedom to know that you're not going anywhere. And that was a beautiful thing about me being home, that they could. And they also like to talk at 11 o'clock at night too, because that's when they come alive, but that's when I'm going to sleep.
Right.
And so that was difficult, but it's okay. I mean, high school is hard enough, and there's so many things that go on, especially nowadays in public high schools, well, in private too, I guess.
And groups and just they're, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we'd have to talk at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'd need that time to get through everything so that my student could, function to go to the next thing. Right. And the homeschooling allowed for that flexibility. So if we stayed up late that night talking, we wouldn't be getting up at 6:30 or 6 or 7, Now, granted, if the student had an 8 o'clock, then, that student would need to be there at 8 o'clock. But the rest of us could sort of sleep in, if we needed to. And if you're in a formal school format, you couldn't have done that. And there wouldn't be the time. I'm so glad that I learned who they were, or who they are. I lament the fact that, my formation was different than theirs. And so I wanted to be there for them so that they could discuss hard things, and I could be there for them and their dad, as well. Years ago when one of my sons was having problems reading, I'm like, I always say, if I had to homeschool just for him, that's why I did this. The other three never had problem. I mean, you give them the phonics, you give them the reading, and they're like, oh yeah. And they read, but it didn't make sense to him. And we went for years without understanding, why is this so difficult? And then one year he was going into 4th grade or 5th grade, I guess. And I got this thing in the mail that was talking about a local reading program. And I'm like, wow, maybe he's got some reading issues. And so we did some testing on him, and sure enough, he's had dyslexia. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So then you feel terrible because you've been yelling at him that he needs to get his work done, and God works in mysterious ways. And so that was really difficult. But we got the resources that he needed. And we actually, we held him back a year so that he could strengthen his reading capabilities and his comprehension capabilities. And because I knew what was coming in the 9th grade, and I wouldn't have known that if I would not have had the other 3 knowing what I knew. And so I'm like, I don't want him to not do this stuff just because he's got this label on him. I'm like, he doesn't have a label. He is a smart, vibrant young person who has gifts that we don't have. And he brings these gifts to our family. And these 3 other siblings of his see these gifts that he has. I mean, he's wonderful at math. He draws well. He juggles. He does these things with his mind, that the other 3 don't do. And so I didn't want that. I didn't want a label on him. So, and I knew he wanted to learn the same things they did, because they'll sit around and talk about, Hamlet or whatnot, or, Aeneas or Odysseus or whatnot. And he's like, well, I want to do that too. Yeah. So we got him the resources that he needed. He was in classes for 4 or 5 years. And now, lo and behold, Kolbe has all these wonderful resources for all the kids that need it. It's just a wonderful gift. And I'm so glad that Kolbe has that for families who need those resources.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I would say those were that's some hard stuff.
Sure. Yeah. you've mentioned along the way of this conversation how your homeschooling chapter is drawing to a close. Do you have more thoughts you want to offer on that?
Sure. It's bittersweet.
Yeah.
It really is. I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm tired. I mean, it's tired in a good way, but I'm tired just the same. The papers come all the time. And truthfully, by the time three of them got to their senior year, they didn't want me reading any of their papers anymore because they didn't feel like they needed the advice or the editing or the grammar or content or whatnot. And so I quit with them. So I'll be interested to see what my last student does, if he wants me to continue or if he wants me, because he's like, Mom, I'm going to school, I'm going to college soon, So I don't know if I'll do it next year or not, but it's a wonderful opportunity to continue to teach because truthfully, over the years, the amount of red on the paper dwindles, because they just become better writers because Kolbe has them writing all the time. And, the more you do it, the better. I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Or the squeaky grease gets whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The more you do it, the better you get at it. So the less editing I have to do. So that I will not be too sad to see that go.
Yeah. You okay with that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. But yeah, it's a bittersweet kind of thing. I'm in total debt to those families who started it over 40 years ago. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to become an advisor, is to give back a little bit to the school that helped form my children. Because God love those people who can say, okay, I want this for grammar and this for literature and this for math. And so
I'm right there with you on the all Kolbe. It's all put together. It's all integrated.
Right. And so, they have a foundation in that. They have a foundation in what it means to be human. They have the philosophy, they have the virtue, they have logic, they have history. Like I said, they can think critically about the world around them. I see the end result. I see the overarching, big plan of the education. And so, I don't doubt that May 2025 or August 2025, when my son does leave, there will be some tears, definitely.
Sure.
There were big, huge ones when my first one left
Sure.
home.
Yeah.
That's a big transition because, your family is different. It is not the same. And the children, the other children there, they feel it. They might not necessarily be able to explain it with words, but they do feel that loss. They sense that absence of that other sibling. And so basically what you are is you're moving into another chapter in your family life. And so I wanted to be able to have something to do that I could give back, could give my experience, could be busy. So I'm thinking probably that the transition to complete advisor role where I'm not a parent will be seamless now that I'm working on it now. That was one reason why I still wanted to sort of have my foot in both places. I wanted to have the parent hat and the advisor hat, because I need time to adjust to the fact that it's just going to be my husband and me again, which is a little strange. I mean, yeah, I wanted it to be a good transition. It's a bittersweet time, and we'll get through it with God's help.
It's important to just be able to acknowledge that. Just
right.
Right there. Yeah.
Right. And being gentle with yourself, being gentle with myself. I wish I would have told myself that more when the first one left. That first year, his senior year, and I don't know if you felt like this with yours, Bonnie, but sleeping was really hard that year. I would get up in the middle of the night, just, I don't know if it was worry or anxious, just, that knowing that something's going to change, but you haven't experienced it yet. So you don't know what it's like. It's sort of like before the birth of your first child, where you're inside, where you can't sleep well and you can't get comfortable. Mm-hmm. Well, this is sort of the same way. You can't sleep well and you can't get comfortable and you don't really know why, but that's why. And so I have the experience now, and he only lives an hour away from me. So he comes home to eat every weekend usually.
I like the analogy to the arrival of the first baby. Yeah, you have no
Yeah,
idea. Yeah,
no, you don't. And if your son is anything like mine, or all of them really, they say, Mom, I'll figure it out.
yeah, right.
Okay, yes,
And they
you
do.
will. And
Yeah.
they do. And maybe not the way I wanted them to do it, but that's part of my relinquishing of that.
Mhm.
We can't be in control for the rest of their lives. It's not good for them. It's
Right.
good for them to go off. It's good for them. They need to. And as hard as that is for us, it's important in your relationship with your spouse, and it's important with your relationship with that particular child. They need to know that you're there and praying for them, but not micromanaging everything. And so it's taken me a couple of kids to learn that too. So
Well, I came to the point when mine were all little at once. I would very often find myself just not able to meet all the needs that were present right all at once. And so I would end up with this prayer. Uh, Lord, please make up the difference between what they need and what I can do. And I
oh,
think
that's
it's applicable
beautiful.
to where,
To
I mean, to all the
college and
stages.
young
And yeah,
adulthood. I
yeah,
agree. I remember sometimes I'll talk with parents who have very, very small children and they're like, oh, it's just going to be so much easier when they get older. And and I look at them and I just say, it's all hard.
it's in
It's
some
just
way,
a
yeah,
different
it's a
kind of
different.
hard. Yeah,
And that's so difficult to conceptualize, to really kind of wrap your
right.
mind around when they're all little and we've been
Right.
all
And
been
they're on
up since
top of
5 in the
you.
morning. And
Right.
yeah,
And and you're nursing one and
right.
you're stirring something else for somebody else and
Yes.
something spills on the floor. I mean, it's a physical hard when they're little. It is a mental and emotional hard when they're older. And it's all hard. But God is shaping you to be the parent that they need at all times, no matter any age that they are.
You mentioned how you enjoy visiting with new families, new to homeschooling, and those who are thinking about it. What advice do you like to give them, or what would you want to leave with them now?
Okay, my advice to a new Kolbe family, someone who's just new to homeschooling in general, is that you can do it. If God has put this on your heart to do, you can. And it's going to look different for you than it looks for everyone else because God made you specifically and your family with the talents and strengths and weaknesses and idiosyncrasies that your family has. And so be not afraid. That's one thing. Be not afraid. God gives you those actual graces. I mean, you get the sanctifying graces from all of those sacraments, so avail yourself of them as frequently as you can. But those graces sometimes aren't going to come until right in the minute when you need them while you're teaching how to diagram some ridiculous sentence with dangling participles and everything that, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, yes. And so remember, teacher manuals are your friends. They're very, very helpful. Inch by inch, everything's a cinch. And what I mean by that is when you're in kindergarten, enjoy kindergarten because your child's never going to be in kindergarten again. Everything is new and wonderful and innocent. Enjoy that year. That doesn't mean you can't be thinking about sixth grade. It just means that you've got to enjoy the moment that you have because it's never going to come by again. You don't have to do everything in the curriculum every single year. There's a lot of recommendations we make, but you don't have to take them all. You are the driver of your child's education. That's the beauty of the principle of subsidiarity. You choose, and we're there to support you. Then I will leave you with these last 5 points. And the wonderful thing is that you have a hand and it has 5 fingers on it. So you can remember these. So the first one is prayer. You've got to be talking to the Lord. You got to have a running conversation with him all day long, every day, running dialogue. Lord, what is it that you want me to do? How do I help these children that you've given to me, that you've blessed me with? Prayer, first and foremost. 2, nutrition. You've got to be feeding your body, mind, and soul like you're feeding those children. You've got proteins, you've got fats. You need those things to be able to do the job that God has given you. You've got to get sleep. 3rd, time management. Your children need to see you figuring out how you do these things so that they can learn themselves. Okay, so prayer, nutrition, time management. 4, self-control. And I don't mean you as an adult, I'm talking about the student. If the student can't sit down and control himself, enough to do the things he needs to do, someone else is going to do it for him. Whether that's you, whether that's a judge, whether that's, some other kind of teacher or whatnot. So self-control is an important thing as well. And the fifth one is organization, a place for everything and everything in its place. So much stress in my life has been caused by, we can't find where the such and such is. And so over years of time, we have learned, systems for each person in the family about how to do it. Some people are better at it than others, but so prayer, nutrition, time management, self-control, and organization. And be not afraid. You can do this. You really, really can. And Kolbe's here to support all families.
I'm so grateful that you stepped from this role of parent into being an advisor, because you're there now. So somebody out there, like, if they're like, well, I think I need to modify in sixth grade, it's crazy, we need to do something.
Sure.
Will this destroy my child? And they can say, Elyse, what should I do? And there's somebody who's been through it now that can, there's always, I mean, you were speaking up before you were an advisor, but it's nice to have you as part of this team, both to speak to the parents and to speak to the school as well. You'll be there to help continue the great services that Kolbe's been providing, and make sure that we stay on track too. So this is
well, thank you very much.
Yep. You're living proof. It can be done well.
It can be done. And like I said, it's a privilege of a lifetime. I can't imagine my life if I wouldn't have been able to do this.
But to your point, like we may not realize heading in how we are going to be confronted with our own shortcomings, weaknesses, character flaws, things that we need to work on, how we ourselves are going to grow through this experience. We think we're doing it for our kids, but it's for us too.
I think, part of me thinks I've learned more than they have. I mean, in some respects, yeah.
For sure. I've cooked up a whole list of relevant Kolbecast episodes, relevant to the things that have come up during our conversation. I'm going to post the links to those in our show notes. The question that Elyse posed earlier: how do you decide which way to go? Online, homeschool, asynchronous, self-paced? So if you're up for that answer, send us an email, podcast@kolbe.org. You could do a voice memo on your phone and email that to us to the same address. You could comment on the social media posts to this episode. Let us know how you decided which way to make use of Kolbe's offerings, the course offerings for your students. Really appreciate, again, Elyse, you stepping up to serve Kolbe in this way, sharing your experience with us all along the way. And we look forward to visiting with you again real soon.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy the eclipse.
Yeah, you too. You too.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, Holy Saints and Angels, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.